Tuareg nationalism is the result of social, political, and economic factors that cause tension between the northern Tuareg minority and the southern Bambara majority. Many uprisings have occurred in Mali in response to the marginalization of the Tuareg people. The worst of these rebellions occurred in April of 2012, and the tensions have yet to be calmed. The current unrest between the Malian government and the Tuareg rebels in Mali brings about many questions. Firstly, who are the Tuaregs? What has led to the disastrous state of the Malian government, economy, and social relations, and most importantly, what can be done to finally create peace in Mali? The Tuaregs of Mali are a nomadic and pastoral minority group that reside in the Azawad homeland of northern Mali and share a common language and culture. They have suffered significant social, political, and economic marginalization from both the French colonial and Malian governments. Due to this ongoing discrimination, the Tuareg people began a nationalistic movement in 1960 that is currently still active. The goal of the Tuareg nationalist movement is to obtain economic and political equality with the Malian majority, to protect the Tuareg cultural identity, and to establish regional autonomy of the Azawad area. The first factor that aided the formation of Tuareg nationalism was the French and Malian marginalization of the Tuareg people. After French colonization in 1890, the Tuareg lost their dominant political role in the Sahelian zone. When Mali became independent in 1960, the French left political power in the hands of black, settled Africans who shared little common history or culture with the nomadic Tuareg, inevitably leading to continued discrimination. The first Malian government wanted to create a common Malian identity based on the historical Mali Empire of the 14th century. The Tuareg people did not identify with this heritage, and the Malian government soon became suspicious of the Tuaregs' lack of enthusiasm for the new national identity. The second factor occurred from 1950 to 1968, when the Malian government enforced policies that prioritized the needs of farmers over the needs of the nomadic and pastoral Tuareg. A step further was taken when the government ignored the land rights of the Tuareg people and allowed the dune belts in the southern Sahelian zone to be taken over by sedentary farmers. This cut the Tuareg off from resources such as pastures, forests, and water, and consequently many of them were forced to abandon their traditional lifestyle and retreat to urban areas. The third factor that led to Tuareg nationalism was the devastating drought and famine periods from 1969 to 1973 and 1981 to 1984 that caused further disturbance to the Tuareg pastoral system. Death of livestock forced many Tuaregs to leave their home regions for administrative centers like Timbuktu. Once the Tuareg refugees arrived in the cities, they lived under miserable conditions in squatter settlements and received low wages as seasonal laborers. The marginalization of the Tuareg people by the French and the independent Malian government, the prioritization of farmers, and the various droughts that struck the Azawad area created a universal resentment among the Tuareg people that manifested itself in a series of rebellions spanning from 1962 to the present day. The series of Tuareg nationalist rebellions began when a Tuareg man attacked and killed several Malian policemen in 1962. The government in Bamako, the capital of Mali, reacted harshly to this attack. After the Malian government ended the Tuareg revolt in 1964, the Tuareg inhabited areas of Mali were governed as military districts and ignored when it came to economic development. Although the first rebellion was brief, it intensified the Tuareg people's growing nationalistic sentiment and showcased the extreme social dissonance between the Tuareg and Bambara that was bound to lead to violence. Unrest reached a boiling point again in 1990 with the influx of returning Malian Tuareg refugees. A resistance movement composed of these individuals and led by Ayad Agali began the second Tuareg uprising by attacking Malian military outposts in June. Following this attack, the Tuareg regime imposed a state of emergency and harshly repressed the Tuareg people. In July of 1990, more than 100 civilians, including women and children, were executed without legal proceedings. In January of 1991, Malian government officials and Tuareg leaders signed a peace agreement called the Tamanrasset Accords that offered the Tuareg people a high degree of autonomy in Azawad and local assemblies that would regulate all economic, social, and cultural issues specific to that region. Despite the promise of this treaty, it did not hold in reality. After the fall of Gaddafi in Libya, hundreds of armed nomadic Tuareg rebels returned to the Azawad homeland to begin the Fourth Tuareg Rebellion. The National Movement for the Liberation of Azawad declared that it is determined to continue their operations until Mali recognizes the Azawad's population right to self-determination. MNLA attacks on military installations in the Kidal region triggered both violent and peaceful protests in the major urban centers of the country. By mid-February, 36,000 people had fled to neighboring countries, and more than 30,000 Malians were internally displaced in the eastern regions of Kidal and Gao. In a matter of 3 days, the Tuareg fighters seized the cities of Kidal, Gao, and Timbuktu. On April 6th, the MNLA unilaterally declared the independence of northern Mali with the statement, "We, the people of Azawad, declare irrevocably the independence of the state of Azawad." The Tuareg rebellions in Mali have never reached this level of instability until now. The recent course of events are a result of a weak political system failing to successfully accomplish democratic practices, a lack of economic and social development in the north and south, an unorganized and lax attitude towards state management, and the unprecedented shock of the Libyan crisis. This complicated combination of factors puts Mali in an unfamiliar situation in which reference to past conciliatory actions, failed or not, seems futile. The possibility of a successful agreement between the Malian government and the Tuareg rebels will not be possible without the fulfillment of, but not limited to, 3 main actions. Firstly, the Malian government, the Bambara majority, and the Tuareg minority must all agree to employ diplomatic tactics instead of violent persuasion. As exhibited by the 3 prior Tuareg rebellions, violence has done nothing but intensify the conflict. Secondly, the strengthening of transitional institutions must become a priority. In the past, the Malian government has made half-hearted attempts at developing these organizations and has had little success. The severe circumstances of the 2012 rebellion proposed the real threat of forced secession, which would have detrimental effects on the Malian economy, political system, and social structure. In order to prevent this, the Malian government must make sure that the process is constructively mediated. Thirdly, a clear distinction between the Tuareg rebels and jihadist Ansar Dine group must be noted. Recently, the Al-Qaeda-linked Ansar Dine has mobilized a movement in the northern region of Mali. Due to the location of the movement and the fact that the Ansar Dine is led by the former Tuareg leader Ayada Ghali, the media has at times created a picture that Tuareg nationalism is now a part of a jihadist movement. However, this is not the case, and such a mistake has potentially negative consequences. Mistakenly labeling the secular and nationalist MNLA as jihadist might alienate the group and reduce the chances of peaceful settlement or negotiations with the Tuareg rebels.